There's a hard truth most people don't want to hear, but if you don't hear it, you'll keep repeating the same heartbreak over and over again. Being too nice does not heal an avoidance fear of closeness, it fuels it. You think if you just love them harder, give them more space, say yes to every need, and never confront their withdrawal, they'll eventually feel safe enough to open up. You think unconditional giving will melt their walls. But here's the reality. When you are too available, too accommodating, too self-sacrificing, you stop being a person they feel drawn to and start being a comfort zone they can take for granted. Avoidants do not run from kindness. They run from pressure. But here's the twist. Over niceness is pressure in disguise. Why? Because it silently demands reciprocity. It signals, I'm giving you all of this, so you'd better stay, you'd better choose me. And for an avoidant, that feels like a trap. You have to understand. Attraction to an avoidant doesn't come from showing them you'll never hurt them. It comes from showing them that you value yourself enough to have boundaries, standards, and a strong identity outside of them. When you are too nice, you remove the very tension, respect, and polarity that keeps a connection alive. So today, I'm going to give you the truth in 8 powerful points. These are the shifts you must make if you want to break free from the exhausting cycle of chasing an avoidant with kindness, only to be met with coldness. Because love is not about begging for connection. It's about standing so firmly in your worth that the right person chooses to step toward you, not away from you. Most people who get caught in the cycle with an avoidant don't realize that their giving has stopped being love and has started being a silent plea for validation. You keep showing up over and over again, answering every text immediately, rearranging your schedule to see them, offering help before they even ask. At first, you tell yourself it's just who you are, generous, caring, and attentive. But underneath that giving, there's a hidden hope. If I do enough, if I show them enough kindness, they'll finally stay, they'll finally open up, they'll finally love me back the way I love them. Here's the problem. An avoidant doesn't see that as proof of love. They see it as proof you don't require anything from them. They start to unconsciously believe your presence is guaranteed, that no matter how distant they become, you'll still be right there waiting with open arms. And when someone feels they don't have to work for connection, they stop valuing it. Overgiving sends another dangerous message that you don't trust your own worth without constantly earning their affection. You start managing the relationship instead of participating in it. You stop letting things be mutual, and instead you're always anticipating, always smoothing, always trying to preempt their discomfort. And ironically, that's exactly what pushes an avoidant further away. Because avoidants are hypersensitive to anything that feels like pressure or emotional control. And overgiving is a form of control. It says, I'm giving you so much, now you must respond in kind. The truth is, love that is freely given is received with warmth. But love that is given as a transaction, even subconsciously, is received with resistance. When every act of kindness comes with an invisible price tag of, please stay, the other person feels cornered, even if you never say those words out loud. To break this cycle, you have to take a hard look at your giving. Ask yourself, am I giving because it's who I am, or because I'm afraid of losing them? Am I giving to add to their life, or to try to fix the gap in how they love me back? When you start giving from a place of abundance, when your cup is full because you've filled it yourself, the energy shifts. You become someone who chooses to give, not someone who needs to give to feel secure. And in that shift, you reclaim your power, your dignity, and the space for a connection that's truly mutual. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They think setting them means being cold, withholding, or pushing someone away. But boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks, protecting the value inside. When you have clear emotional boundaries, you're not blocking love. You're creating the safest possible space for it to exist. With avoidance, this is critical because their core fear is being engulfed, controlled, or consumed by someone else's emotions. When you have no boundaries, you confirm that fear without realizing it. Think about it. If every time they withdraw, you rush in with extra reassurance, endless patience, and self-sacrifice, you're allowing them to set the emotional terms without any balance. They learn, sometimes without even meaning to, that they can decide how much closeness there will be, and you'll simply adjust to whatever they choose. This dynamic quietly erodes respect because human beings value what has structure. Without boundaries, there's no structure. Without structure, there's no stability. Boundaries tell the other person, I know where I end and where you begin. They say, I can love you deeply, but I will not betray myself to do it. And that's exactly what earns respect from an avoidant. It shows you're not chasing them to complete you. You already stand complete on your own, and the relationship is an addition to your life, not the source of your identity. Avoidants often push to see where the line is, not because they're malicious, but because their subconscious is testing whether you'll collapse under the weight of their fear. If you keep giving up your needs, your standards, and your voice to keep the peace, they don't feel safer. They feel the opposite. They feel the quiet pressure of your unspoken expectations, and they instinctively retreat further. But when you can calmly say, I care for you, but I need consistency to feel safe, or I respect your space, but I won't stay in a connection where I feel ignored, you create a container where love can breathe. You're not demanding they meet your needs instantly. You're simply showing that you have needs, and you're not afraid to voice them. That is the very thing that transforms the dynamic. When you protect your emotional boundaries, you stop being someone who passively adapts to avoidant patterns. You become someone who invites them into a healthy rhythm, one where connection isn't about fear of loss, but about mutual choice and respect. That's the space where real intimacy has a chance to grow. Silence is one of the most uncomfortable experiences for someone who fears abandonment. The moment there's a pause, a gap, or a delay in response, your mind starts racing. Are they upset? Are they losing interest? Did I do something wrong? That anxiety can be so intense that you feel compelled to fill the space immediately with reassurance check-ins or attempts to fix the vibe. But with avoidance, that instinct backfires in a big way. When you rush to close every silence, you're sending a message that you cannot tolerate distance. And to an avoidant, that distance is not only normal, it's necessary for them to feel safe. By constantly filling in the gaps, you unintentionally communicate that their space is dangerous for you, that you can't handle the ebb and flow of connection without panicking. This makes them feel more suffocated, more on edge, and more inclined to create even more space. Silence isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's processing. Sometimes it's recharge. Sometimes it's simply the natural rhythm of two people with different emotional tempos. But when you treat every quiet moment as a problem, you interrupt their internal process and replace it with your urgency. That urgency doesn't read as love to them. It reads as pressure. The paradox is, the more comfortable you become with silence, the more an avoidant can relax in your presence. When they sense you're not anxiously waiting for them to close the gap, they begin to feel that the connection is voluntary, not forced. And that is when they're most likely to step forward on their own. This doesn't mean you tolerate endless absence or indifference. It means you stop reacting to every lull as if it's the beginning of the end. You keep living your life in those spaces, engaging in your passions, connecting with friends, taking care of your body and mind. You let them see that while you value the connection, you're not dependent on it for your stability. When you stop filling every silence, you create a subtle but powerful shift. You let the relationship breathe. You give the other person the dignity of choosing to come closer instead of feeling chased into it. And in that breathing room, respect and attraction have the space to grow stronger. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they care about an avoidant is unconsciously making that person the center of their entire world. Every decision, every plan, every ounce of energy starts revolving around them, their moods, their availability, their signals. Without even realizing it, you slowly abandon your own life to orbit theirs. And while your intention might be love, the message you're sending is dependency. Avoidants are hypersensitive to feeling trapped or overly needed. When they sense that you have nothing going on outside of them, they feel a subtle but constant pressure, as if the weight of your happiness is resting entirely on their shoulders. That pressure doesn't pull them closer. It drives them to create distance so they can breathe. What makes them feel safe is knowing you have your own center of gravity, that you're not clinging to them as your sole source of purpose or fulfillment. Maintaining your own life isn't just about keeping busy. It's about deeply investing in the parts of you that exist independently of the relationship. Your passions, your friendships, your career goals, your health, your creativity. It's about letting them see you light up over things that have nothing to do with them. This not only relieves them of the pressure to be your everything, but it also makes you more magnetic. Why? Because people are drawn to those who have a strong sense of self and a life that's worth joining, not rescuing. When you continue to grow in your own lane, you also protect yourself from the emotional roller coaster of avoidant patterns. Their distance won't feel like an earthquake to your sense of stability because you'll still have other meaningful connections, pursuits, and joys to lean on. You're not waiting for them to give you permission to live. You're already living. Paradoxically, the more you maintain your independence, the safer they feel to approach. They start to see that being with you doesn't mean losing themselves. And instead of pulling away to preserve their freedom, they can lean in without fear. When you prioritize your own life, you create a natural balanced connection without suffocation, closeness without losing your identity. And that balance is what makes an avoidant far more likely to keep choosing you, not because they feel obligated, but because they genuinely want to be part of a life that's already rich and full. One of the quickest ways to lose respect in a relationship with an avoidant is to communicate indirectly. This happens when you're afraid to speak your truth, so you drop hints, make vague comments, or hope they'll just know what you need without you having to say it. You might believe you're being gentle or considerate, but in reality, you're creating confusion. And for an avoidant, confusion often feels like emotional danger. Avoidants tend to be literal in how they interpret interactions. They don't usually pick up on subtle emotional cues the way you might expect. If you want something, but you communicate it through sighs, half statements, or passive suggestions, they're not decoding it as a request. In fact, they may not even realize you're expressing a need at all. And when your needs go unmet because you never clearly stated them, resentment builds. That resentment leaks out through tone, attitude, or withdrawal, and the avoidant feels a surge of tension without understanding why. Speaking directly, with calmness, clarity, and confidence, changes everything. It doesn't mean being harsh or aggressive. It means owning your needs without shame. Instead of saying, "It's fine, don't worry about it." When it's not fine, you might say, "I felt hurt when our plans were canceled last minute. I'd like more notice next time." That's not pressure. That's transparency. And transparency is something avoidants can work with because it removes the guessing game that makes them uncomfortable. When you're direct, you also send a powerful message about your self-respect. You're saying, "I value myself enough to express what matters to me." That builds trust, because it shows you're not hiding your truth or trying to manipulate their behavior through guilt or silence. You're standing in your authenticity, which allows them to meet you on solid ground. This approach also prevents the cycle of silent expectation followed by disappointment, a cycle that slowly kills connection. With directness, you give them the chance to actually show up for you in the ways that matter, and if they choose not to, you'll know it's a choice, not a misunderstanding. Avoidants are not allergic to needs, they're allergic to feeling cornered by unspoken demands. When you stop hinting and start speaking openly, you create a relationship dynamic where both people know where they stand. That clarity doesn't just make communication smoother, it makes connection safer for both of you. One of the most common traps people fall into with an avoidant partner is trying to immediately repair the connection the moment they pull away. The silence, the shift in tone, the sudden drop in affection, it can feel unbearable, so you reach out more, offer more, apologize even when you've done nothing wrong, just to close the gap. But here's the truth: when you rush to erase every sign of distance, you rob the other person of the opportunity to feel the natural consequences of their withdrawal. Avoidants often retreat because it gives them a sense of control and safety. But if every time they pull away you respond by leaning in harder, you're essentially rewarding the very behavior that creates the disconnection. You teach them, "If you need space, I'll do the chasing. You don't have to take responsibility for the distance you create because I'll bridge it for you." Over time, this can make the pattern worse because there's no discomfort on their side, only comfort knowing you'll always come back, no matter what. Allowing natural consequences isn't about punishing them. It's about balance. If they withdraw, let the space exist. If they don't text back for a while, resist the urge to fill their inbox. If they cancel plans, don't immediately rearrange your life to accommodate the next possible time. Let them feel what it's like when your energy, your attention, and your presence are no longer a given. That's not manipulation. It's simply holding the relationship to a standard where effort is mutual. The beauty of this approach is that it gives them the chance to notice your absence in a meaningful way. They can't miss what's never gone. When they feel the loss of your warmth and consistency, they have the space to reflect on what you bring to their life. This can spark a natural pull toward you, not because you demanded it, but because they chose it. And for you, allowing natural consequences reinforces self-respect. It stops you from abandoning your own needs in the pursuit of closeness. You're no longer the one carrying the full weight of maintaining the connection. You're simply showing, through your actions, that you're willing to meet them halfway, but not to chase them endlessly. This subtle shift changes the entire dynamic because it places the responsibility for connection where it belongs in both people's hands. There's a dangerous misconception that being nice means always being understanding, always forgiving, and always finding a way to rationalize someone's hurtful behavior. Many people dealing with an avoidant partner fall into this trap because they believe that patience and compassion will eventually melt the walls and create closeness. But when you consistently excuse disrespect, you're not creating a safe space for love. You're creating an environment where your needs and feelings are invisible. Disrespect doesn't always look like shouting or insults. Sometimes it's chronic unreliability. Sometimes it's dismissing your emotions as overreactions. Sometimes it's repeated behaviors they know hurt you, but they do anyway. When you respond to these moments by minimizing them, telling yourself, they didn't mean it, they're just stressed, or that's just how they are, you're training yourself to tolerate less than you deserve. And here's the hard truth: avoidants often operate at the level of treatment you allow. When you accept disrespect without speaking up, you communicate that there's no real consequence for crossing your boundaries. Over time, this erodes both your self-respect and their respect for you. Relationships, even with avoidance, thrive on mutual accountability. If one person is allowed to continually act without regard for the other's emotional well-being, the connection becomes unbalanced and resentment quietly grows. Calling out disrespect doesn't mean attacking or shaming the other person. It means calmly and clearly naming what isn't acceptable and following through with action if it continues. It's saying, I care about you, but I won't stay in situations that diminish me. That might feel risky, especially if you fear losing them, but the truth is, allowing mistreatment in the name of keeping them close doesn't create love, it creates dependency. Avoidants, despite their fears of closeness, often respect partners who stand firm in their values. When you refuse to tolerate behavior that hurts you, you set a tone of self-worth that challenges them to rise to the occasion if they want to keep you in their life. And if they choose not to, you've protected your dignity and made space for the kind of love that doesn't require you to shrink. Real love cannot grow in a space where one person's comfort always outweighs the other's respect. The moment you stop making excuses for disrespect, you send a clear message: connection with you is a privilege, not a given. And that shift can change everything. When your actions are driven by fear, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of losing the connection, every move you make in the relationship becomes about preservation rather than authenticity. You start over-giving, over-apologizing, over-explaining, and over-compromising, not because it feels right, but because you're trying to keep the other person from walking away. That kind of energy is heavy. It's not attractive, and it's not sustainable. An avoidant, in particular, will sense that fear almost immediately. They may not consciously label it, but they will feel the subtle pressure it creates. Every time you sacrifice your truth just to keep the peace, you're sending the message that your self-worth depends on their acceptance. And for someone who already fears being trapped or needed too much, that can trigger even more withdrawal. Leading with self-respect flips the dynamic completely. When you operate from self-worth, You make decisions based on what aligns with your values and well-being, not on what might keep someone from leaving. You still care, you still love, but you don't abandon yourself in the process. You're willing to show up fully, but you're also willing to walk away if the connection requires you to shrink or compromise your dignity. This doesn't make you cold or unfeeling. It makes you strong and trustworthy, because when you stand in your truth, the other person knows that every yes you give is genuine, not motivated by fear. It also means that your love is a choice, not an obligation, which makes it infinitely more valuable. Self-respect also creates stability. When your emotional state doesn't rise and fall entirely based on their behavior, you become grounded. You stop reacting to every shift in mood or closeness as if it's a crisis. That steadiness is magnetic. It allows the avoidant to relax, because they no longer feel like they're holding your emotional world together. Instead, they're engaging with someone who is whole, centered, and capable of loving without losing themselves. In the end, leading with self-respect means you stop trying to earn love through sacrifice and start inviting love through authenticity. It's the difference between chasing someone to keep them from leaving and living in such a way that they choose every single day to stay. And that choice, freely made, is the foundation of a healthy, lasting connection. At the heart of everything we've talked about is one simple truth: being too nice with an avoidant is not the same as building a healthy, secure bond. You can pour endless love, patience, and sacrifice into the connection, but if it comes at the expense of your boundaries, your voice, and your self-worth, it will not create the intimacy you're longing for. In fact, it often has the opposite effect. It reinforces their fear of closeness and makes you feel unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. Love without balance is not love that thrives. It's love that quietly depletes you until you have nothing left to give. What truly shifts the dynamic with an avoidant is not trying harder to be accommodating. It's showing up as your full, authentic self. It's understanding that your needs, your standards, and your well-being are just as important as theirs. When you stop overgiving, when you let silence exist without panic, when you hold boundaries that honor your worth, you stop feeding the cycle of distance and pursuit. Instead, you create a rhythm where closeness is mutual, not one-sided, and where they can approach you without feeling trapped. The real power comes from living a life so rich and full outside of the relationship that you're not dependent on them for your sense of self, your career, your passions, your friendships, your personal growth. These are not distractions from love. They are the foundation that makes love sustainable. When you are grounded in your own life, you no longer feel the urge to control, fix, or rescue. You can let them have their space without fearing you'll disappear in the process. And ironically, that freedom is what makes them feel safest with you. Equally important is the courage to call out what doesn't serve you. Excusing disrespect, minimizing hurt, or pretending something is fine when it's not doesn't keep the relationship intact. It erodes trust and connection. By calmly naming what's unacceptable and following through with action, you show that being with you is a privilege, not a guarantee. That standard doesn't push the right people away. It draws them closer, because respect is the soil where love grows. In the end, the deepest transformation happens when you stop leading with fear and start leading with self-respect. You no longer act from a place of, how do I keep them? And instead move from, how do I honor myself? When you embody that energy, the dynamic changes. They don't stay because you've made yourself endlessly available. They stay because your presence is powerful, your love is genuine, and your life is worth being part of. That is the kind of connection that doesn't just survive the challenges of an avoidant relationship. It redefines it entirely. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this message spoke to you, if it made you pause, reflect, or see things differently, that's the first step toward real change. Remember, your worth isn't defined by how much you give, but by how deeply you honor yourself. If you found value here, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss the next conversation that could shift your perspective. Your journey matters, your growth matters, and you deserve relationships that lift you higher. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never forget, the most powerful love you can give is the one you give yourself first. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.